On this course, we're going to talk about scaling a dirt world business. I've seen in my travels, and I know a lot of people, they get good at digging basements or laying pipe or whatever it may be on their own, and all of a sudden their business has grown, they've hired more people, they have more equipment, and now they're managing, operating a business as a whole rather than just doing what they've always known, which is digging, building things. So, Randy, where do you want to start here as far as scaling that business? Because I know you started, when you came into the business, it was quite a bit smaller, and you saw it even before that with your dad. It was a pretty small business, and it's scaled pretty substantially as time has gone on.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things is don't feel like you have to, you don't have to be a giant, right? Like, it's not for everybody. I mean, know what you love. If you love digging basements and that's what you want to do, don't feel like you have to be this massive business. It's okay. But there's a lot of us that do want to grow. And so I think what you have to realize is there comes a time where you can't do it all. And I think you've probably seen this, but there's like this point where in the businesses where they're doing what they love and it's fun, and then they break that apex, and all of a sudden it's like chaos. They can't get a handle of it. They're running around putting out fires, and it's not fun anymore. I've probably heard that half a dozen to dozen times, just people around me that I know really well, like, hey, it's not fun anymore. So I think what you need to recognize is, one, what's your goals? Mm-hmm. Hey, is my goal to grow this business because I want to grow it so big that I can pass it on to my family so I can sell it one day? Or do I want to do what I love because I love it and make a pretty good living at it? Mm-hmm. And that probably helps decide how much growth you need.
That's an important thing. I've seen people that have scaled up, even if it's not deliberately, it's just happened, and all of a sudden they end up with a business they don't even want. They just want to be the person in the piece of equipment doing what they love every single day. And then other guys they've just started out, and they just have a skid steer, but they're like, I want that big company. I don't know why we can't get to that $1 billion level. So I think looking yourself in the mirror, determining what you really want, hugely important. Yeah.
And like I said, I think sometimes we're like, man, I need to be huge. Like, that's not, like, life's not about having a huge business. Mm-hmm. Like, do what you enjoy. If you really want to be in a piece of equipment, that's where you have the most happiness, that's what you really enjoy, then maybe being a 10 or 20 or 30 or $100 million business isn't right for you. That's okay. So I guess maybe first advice for scaling is know if you really want to, right? And then I'd say after that, there's probably quite a few things you need to do. One, you need to recognize, how did you get to the point you are in a business? So if you get to the point where you're gonna have to scale, you need to reflect back, how did I get here? And what mistakes did I make? And what did I learn? And I'm certain if you do that, you'll say, I made, these 5 really big mistakes. And remember that, because part of scaling is gonna be allowing lots of people to make 5 or 10 mistakes that are really big.
Yeah, and how do you, what advice do you have for people that need to get their hands off the wheel a little bit? Because I've seen this a lot, is somebody does want to grow, but they're still way too involved in the business day to day. And they're hurting the business by being too involved in it, not letting other people grow and make those mistakes. So what kind of advice do you have for someone that, hey, I want my business to grow, I'm just not sure how to take my hands off the reins?
Yeah. First of all, it's hard, right? I think sometimes it's a lot like parenting. So there's some things you'll let your kids do. Like, they're learning to walk, you'll let them fall. But they're walking around the house, you don't let them put their finger in an electrical outlet. Mm-hmm. There's different levels of risk or different levels of failure. So I think what you have to recognize is there will be some failures that are just okay. So, maybe an example is, hey, I want you to put together this plan for a project, or, a work plan. And they put together a work plan, and you review it, and it says, hey, this is what we're gonna do, this is how, this is why. And you might come in there and be like, oh, this is crap. I wouldn't build it that way. Like, does that mean that they failed? Mm-hmm. Or did they have a different approach? Maybe it's not the way you would do it, and at first that you may not want to just let that go, but don't just say like, this is stupid, right? No one will rise if every time they put their effort into something, they just get shut down. So go into that meeting and say, hey, all right, I see this work plan. Help me understand why we're doing it this way. Why did you think to do it this way? Because there's a good chance they have different perspective, and there's probably a few really good ideas in there. And if you manage that with what you would do, you'll come up with a better plan. But what I see happen a lot is they start delegating responsibility. They come in and then they look at it and they're like, this is crap. Why do I have to freaking do everything? That's like, I feel like I hear that all the time. Why am I the one that has to do everything? Well, because you want it your way. And you have to give a little bit of liberty. We were talking just internally, and I used the word, I think I heard this at one of the musters with Echelon Front, operational controls. Like, set some guardrails, like let the guys bump back and forth off these guardrails, but give the men and women in your organization a little bit of freedom. So I'm not sure if that makes sense, but when you start saying, hey, I need to let people do stuff, how do I let go? Like, define in the different things, like where is the safe space that they can be creative, they can make decisions without really hurting the business. Define those first, and that probably simplifies a lot of the decisions. If you know, like, hey, there's a no-go here and a no-go here, but within that, you have some liberty.
I think you need to first have a good attitude about it too. There's so many people I've noticed, they have such a negative attitude about, these people just don't know what they're doing. And it becomes, if you keep saying that, it's gonna become true. You also said last night when we were talking that some of your most expensive mistakes have been the biggest blessings to your business overall.
Oh yeah, like, because usually when you make a mistake, it makes you like really analyze what went wrong, and then dig into it and make a correction. So I think it helps with that. As you're talking, I was thinking, what's interesting is when people start to delegate these responsibilities, and it's not being done the way that they want, they don't always go about it the right way. And that is like, right away, they just try and fix it. And I'm guilty of this because I've done it. But a lot of times, if you let it play out, you'll realize it's not that big of a difference. And let me give you an example. We were estimating a project, ground conditions were kind of soft, and I thought, like, we should be using haul trucks and excavators here. The person who put the estimate together was like, no, I think we can run scrapers with a dozer. We can push through this. And there's all this debate about which way was right. I get done at the end, and I say, okay, let's both estimate our ways. The difference was like 4 cents a cubic yard. And you're like, wait, if I would have just let this play out and not get all involved, we would have had our scope review, and I would have realized, 4 cents a cubic yard, we're like 200,000, we're talking a really small amount. And the reality is that's at the estimating stage. There's a lot more stuff from the operational side of things that's going to have a bigger effect on our price than that 4%. So don't be so in a rush to step in and stop what's happening. Like, let it play out a little bit. As long as you've set those guardrails, like, let it play out a little bit.
No, that's a good point. And what I've discovered too is people will surprise you because your way of always doing it, even if it's worked, may not be the best way to do it. And so if you allow someone to truly be creative about solving a problem or approaching something in their way, I've noticed this all the time I would have never thought of that. And that is the better way to do it. And that makes all of us better off at the end of the day, even though it wasn't my idea. That's a good thing. I'm glad it was somebody else's idea, and the business is better as a result. Putting my ego aside, I don't have to be the guy with the answers all the time. And we just talked about this yesterday with Marcus, is, as the leader of the business or as a leader of your crew or whatever, you want to be the guy with the answers. That's not always the best. And that's honestly, it's rarely the best in a lot of cases, especially scaling a business.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, as a leader, some of your biggest successes, like some of the greatest joys you have, should be having those guys who step up or those girls who step up and make those leadership decisions, and they just knock it out of the park. Like, that should be really the joy. When I talk about like those guardrails, I think one of the best ways to establish those in a business as you're growing it, it's bigger than you. You can't be out there managing every project. You can't be out there making sure quality's right, safety's right. So you have to start saying, okay, the business is bigger than me now, which happens super quick.
Yeah.
But a lot of us hold on to that as long as we can. Like, we probably outgrew the business. That business probably outgrew me just a few years after I got involved. But maybe my ego, I didn't want to let go. I kind of refused to let that be. And, like, being honest with myself, there's times like I do this better than anyone else in here, right? And now I can look back and say that's not the case, but I had some ego. So all I was going to say is guardrails, a lot of times are systems.
And that's what I was going to ask is what's an example of a guardrail, systems, processes, how have those guardrails actually played out within your business?
Yeah, so here you are, you're trying to manage a project and you're like, well, how do I manage this when I can't be there all the time now? Well, you need some systems in place. So job costing is how in construction we identify what are the costs, all the costs associated with this project. So what are my labor costs? What are my equipment costs, my material costs? What are my overhead costs? My insurance at my home office, the people in the office. And then even more than that, how do they apply to definable activities? The CFMA has said most projects' trajectory cannot be changed after about 20 to 30% complete. So pretty quickly into your project, you've decided financially and on schedule where it's going to be. And it gets exponentially harder to make the change. So you have to really say, all right, what's a definable activity? For example, in the dirt world, SWIP or SWIPy or SWPP, the installation of silt fence and wattles. Hey, that's a definable activity. What are my material costs? What are my labor costs? What are my equipment costs? And then, like, that might be the first 5% of your project. So what inputs go into that from our estimating standpoint, and then creating a system from a job costing side that says, here are these costs as they come in, and are they aligning, right? Yeah. Are we close, or are we going over budget?
Yeah.
So other definable activities, moving dirt. So a lot of companies have a phase code or a job costing code that says, hey, I'm going to move dirt, and that's phase code or job costing code. I'm just going to make something up. 300. We're placing cut to fill, and so now you have to have not only a system of estimating costs and tracking costs, but doing it basically real time, right? If you know the trajectory of the job's pretty set at 20 to 30% complete, you need to be on top of knowing how much fuel, equipment, labor is going into every cubic yard being moved on a job site. So job costing, which we'll go into in more depth, is one of those systems. There's plenty of other systems. Examples like forecasting, budgets. So, hey, what are we going to bill next month, and the month after that, and the month after that? That's not always easy, especially the smaller you are, because you have smaller jobs. But you need to be looking ahead, and the reason is that allows you to understand what people do I need, what equipment do I need, what will my cash look like, and so a system to forecast, a system to project manage, making sure quality and safety are completed. All of these are different systems, and we'll go into them in a lot of detail on those specific tracks associated with those topics.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing is all these systems allow you as the owner, leader, to understand the health of projects and as your business as a whole without being involved in every step of the way.
Correct.
And I just wanted to note too, what is the benefits of scaling for your personal life as well? I think there's this notion that you always need to be worked up as a business owner in this industry. You always need to feel like you need to go do something or be here or be there, and there's a huge cost associated with that. And now I'm not saying you haven't worked hard and you haven't done a lot, but whenever I interact with people that do empower individuals, I feel like there's a greater sense of control. over their business and over their lives. And then I see someone who hasn't and doesn't trust people, and it's just like absolute pandemonium the entire time.
I think what's cool is I've done both.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I was 26 when my dad died, and so it was on me. And the world was against me. Like, I heard guys in their 50s like that kid's gonna run the business into the ground.
Yeah.
So I felt like I had to, like, I have to make sure this works, and I had to micromanage. Like David Dean, who's our area manager, he was the vice president of our company, he's the area manager of Arizona. Like, I remember to this day, I'm so glad he didn't quit.
Yeah.
He'd be on the phone having conversations, and I'd like, hey, no, you need to say that differently. Like, what the heck was I doing? Like, micromanaging to the max.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, luckily he knew it was from a place of caring,
Mm-hmm.
but nonetheless, like, I'm thankful he didn't quit. And so you are worked up because you feel like you're the only one that can do it, and your way's the right way. As you let go, create those guardrails, those systems, it's still hard. It's still hard to let go. It's still hard for that to happen. But there's this freedom that comes too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for me personally, the last 3 years of my life have improved exponentially. And my wife, if she was here, she would echo it very loudly. Me and my wife had really never been on a week-long vacation from the time I was 22 until the time I was 31, I think. And then as the systems were in place and the people were in place, I was able to say, you know what, we're gonna go to Europe for 12 days. And we did. And we made money while I was gone.
Yeah.
And had very few phone calls. Because all those people, they had risen. And the only reason they had is because they made mistakes. We taught around those mistakes. We had guardrails or safety measures in place. None of them were huge. And we just said, we had a conversation like, hey, I wouldn't have done it this way, and this is why. Help me understand why you did it that way. Okay. Well, if you can see, if you would have done it this way, it would be better. And then you just move on. And most people want to do good. There's very few people in an organization who show up to work today and say, I want to suck. You know, like, this doesn't happen.
Yeah, and there's, you'll have bad actors every once in a while, but it bums me out when I see somebody does get screwed, and now they make a rule or lose trust for everyone within that applies to everyone within the organization, and they take that control from everybody because they got screwed by one person instead of just, hey, this was a bad thing that happened to us, but I'm going to continue to trust people. I'm going to continue to empower people because I think this is the best way forward.
Yeah, that's true.
It happens all the time.
It does. I actually have just like 2 weeks ago, had a report come into me. I read the report, and on the report, at the end of it, this is the phrase I saw: new company policy for X. Mm-hmm. And I went and saw David Dean, who's the area manager of Person Management, said, how many times has this happened? And he's like, this is maybe the first time I can remember. I'm like, okay, so we're gonna start creating company policies because something happens once every 5 years?
Yeah.
Like, no, we don't need a company policy. Let's just train around the principle, and if every 5 years this mistake happens, it's an opportunity for us to remind everybody this is something we don't do.
Exactly.
But you don't need to keep, like, there's this creativity that's allowed within these safety measures that creates innovation. If you just keep narrowing them more and more and more, all of a sudden there's no innovation. Mm-hmm. We're not getting better. And if we're not getting better, then everyone around us is, and we won't be here.
Yeah. Before we wrap this up, where do you think Blount would be as a business if you had maintained total control, if you still did everything?
That's we'd be at least a third of the size we were. I may not even be in the industry. I'm being honest. From 26 to 30, I learned and grew a ton. Mm-hmm. But there were nights where I worked in the office all day. I went into the office 6 o'clock, worked till 5, went home, ate, changed my clothes, worked a night shift. Thought I was gonna go home that next morning. Something happened on a job site. Saturday, slammed an energy drink, drove to another job site, worked until 2, came home. Like, you can't work 36 hours straight on a regular basis and stay sane, emotionally strong.
Yeah.
And so,
Married.
yeah, married.
Yeah.
So I'd say, I don't know for sure, but I'd say most likely I wouldn't be in the industry.
Yeah.
I would have burned myself out. It wouldn't have been fun. It wouldn't have been worth the sacrifice. And I wouldn't be here, which would be sad because I love this industry.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a good place to wrap this up. So that's where we're at as far as scaling a business and deciding how and why to scale.